Thank you. Thank you all and welcome. We're pleased to present today's webinar, Biochar as a Circular Practice in Coffee. This is the first in this year's webinar series, Regenerating Value Through Circular Economy in Coffee. It's organized in partnership with International Coffee Organization, International Trade Center, and the Center for Circular Economy in Coffee. This webinar series explores the transformative potential of circular economy in coffee. We have panelists who are leading entrepreneurs, researchers, and value chain actors who are innovating in circular economy. This year's series highlights the findings and experiences from members of the Center for Circular Economy in Coffee and the multi-stakeholder circular economy working group, which is part of the International Trade Center's Coffee Guide Network. This year, we're deepening into practical opportunities and challenges presented in applying the circular economy model in the coffee sector. There will be 3 more webinars this year in October, November, and December. And we're kicking off the series this year with the topic of biochar as both a regenerative agriculture and circular economy practice. The webinar series builds from the most recent ICO coffee
Facts,
development
I'm
report.
happy.
This 4th edition of ICO's flagship report was created by ICO, ITC, the Center for Circular Economy, Politecnico di Torino, and the Lavazza Foundation, with substantial inputs from the University College of London and the Global Circular Economy Working Group. The coffee development report contains data and technical information on coffee byproducts, case studies and examples of innovations using coffee byproducts, including biochar, and strategic recommendations for how the coffee sector can come together to support circular economy in coffee. Among the strategic recommendations in the CDR is the need for pre-competitive collaboration and broad sharing of information on circular economy in coffee. So the Center for Circular Economy in Coffee aims to address that gap through its pre-competitive platform by enhancing and nurturing circular economy principles and practices with the coffee sector. It aims to promote circular economy culture and knowledge, collect and share good practices, and support our members in pilot projects and research in circular economy and coffee. Our founding partners are Lavazza Foundation, Politecnico di Torino, and University of Gastronomic Sciences in Palenzo, and our founding strategic partners, ICO, ITC, and UNIDO. We now have 64 members, and the center is open to all players in the coffee value chain, from producers, traders, to roasters and coffee shops at multinational or small and medium enterprise scale. The center is also open for coffee sector institutions, research and development partners, and relevant civil society at a global level, and we hope that you may join us. So why circular economy in coffee? The global coffee industry generates over 40 million tons of biomass annually through coffee processing. This biological material can be an environmental waste management problem for coffee producers and processors throughout the value chain. At the same time, it's an underutilized resource that is full of potential for sustainable value addition and waste reduction. The entire coffee plant contains unique compounds that are suitable for a variety of industries. Yet when we make a cup of coffee, we only end up using between 1 to 5% of the weight of the original coffee cherry in your cup of coffee. This presents an enormous opportunity for the coffee sector to reduce this waste that occurs from processing and create new value addition products and innovations. So I'm happy to present today's panel. Our moderator is Tom Mills, who is a Stripe Climate Fellow. He's also the author of a new report, Unlocking the Future of Climate Smart Agriculture, assessing the climatic, agronomic, environmental, socioeconomic, and commercial benefits of biochar carbon removal and enhanced rock weathering in global South agricultural value chains. We're happy to have him moderate today's panel discussion on the opportunities, partnership models, and challenges in integrating biochar into coffee value chain and production systems. Our panelists are Luisa Marin, the Executive Director of International Biochar Initiative, Olivier Reynal, the co-founder and Managing Director of Net Zero, Tiago Batista, the founder of Diamante Origins in Brazil, Thomas Caslin, the CEO and co-founder of Cotiera, and Pedro Manga, the prosperity and impact leader of Caravella Coffee. And without further ado, I hand it over to you, Tom.
Catherine, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here today. The group of people we have in the audience are those people who can really action change and integrate new practices within the value chain. So it's fantastic to have such a great audience group today. I'll come on to the panel in a bit. But to frame today's discussion, I really wanted to start by explaining three deeply interlinked challenges that sit at the center of the agricultural transformation. And these challenges are agronomic, they're climatic, and they're livelihood. And they're not isolated problems, they interact, they reinforce one another, and addressing them requires integrated, scalable solutions. And that's really going to be the focus of today's discussion. So just to unpack these challenges, if we take agronomy, around 65% of the world's croplands are already moderately to severely degraded. And that's not just a statistic, it's a systemic risk to our food security, to the livelihoods of our farmers, and to the stability of our supply chains. And a major driver of that is acidification. Highly acidic soils can cut productivity by between 10 to 50%. And in many locations, it's just not economically feasible to be applying solutions like agricultural lime at the scale that's needed. We also have big problems with things like aluminium, availability of nutrients, biological activity slowing down, that engine of soil health, looking at phosphorus to make fertilizer less effective. And we also see these declines due to this in our soils from soil organic carbon, that soil structure, that water holding capability that we need so desperately to be able to respond to the droughts and the floods and the extreme heat we see increasing today. And also we see deficiencies of nutrients. Degraded soils are often less responsive to fertilizers. They have widespread potassium gaps and often lack key micronutrients. And these issues often feed into this vicious cycle of lower productivity, greater fertilizer dependency, moving through to greater acidification and so forth. And then we have this second core challenge, which is around the climate. We're all heavily aware of the climate change challenge we face, but it's worth noting that agriculture and land use change are the world's second largest emitter industry, representing a quarter of global emissions. Carbon removal from carbon dioxide from deforestation, fossil fuel uses, fertilizer, land use change, conversion of these sinks of of greenhouse gases into source, but also other very heavily polluting gases such as methane in damp conditions or nitrous oxide from fertilizer and other areas. But as well as the need to mitigate climate change, we also know that there's going to be an increasing requirement to adapt and build resilience. And we saw that last year, for example, in Brazil, where coffee prices spiked 55% following the 2023 drought. And then lastly, we have these deep farmer challenges as well. These agronomic, these climatic adaptation challenges really concentrate around the vulnerability and the resilience of the farmer to manage these intensifying trends. And these extreme weather events really challenge that. And breaking this cycle requires a solution that can simultaneously restore soil, build resilience to climate impacts, and improve farmer incomes while delivering climate change mitigation. And then moving on, we see these playing out deeply in agribusinesses. So agribusinesses under mounting pressure from investors, consumers, regulators, coming through the brands, going into the traders, the exporters, to cut the environmental impact of their supply chains while still ensuring raw material security. Fertilizer inefficiency is a major challenge. Around 70% of applied nitrogen and phosphates lost or unused, driving runoff, eutrophication, soil degradation. Okay, so the sector is also linked to 70 to 80% of deforestation and roughly 60% of global wildlife decline. We have these big biodiversity, nature risks. And then, as Catherine alluded earlier, we have more than 450 million tons of cross residue being wasted annually, reinforcing those dependence on fossil fuel inputs, missing opportunities for circularity. And all of this is happening in the backdrop of climate change and this tightening regulation. Um, and and today we're going to be talking about one of those high potential solutions that, if used in the correct context, has the potential to deliver across these three challenge areas, and that's biochar, the conversion of biomass into biochar, and then its application back onto croplands. Just to put this into context, almost over 2.5 million biochar carbon credits were transacted between 2020 to 2025. 86% of deliveries of durable carbon removal credits in 2024 alone came from biochar. So this is a really this exists today, and we're going to be hearing from a fantastic panel around these areas. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to introduce the panelists, and we've got a great curation of the panelists today as well. So Louisa, why don't you start and tell us what you do?
Uh, Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning from Mexico. I'm based in Mexico City. Thank you very much, Tom, for the background introduction for the topic today. My name is Luisa Marin. I'm the Executive Director of the International Biochar Initiative, or IBI, and I came into this work after 2 decades working in conservation and sustainability development, mostly in Latin America. And what drew me to biochar, as you said, is this wonderful combination of climate impact, equity, and practicality. It is a solution that is rooted in science, and it's flexible enough to be applied both in the high-tech industries, but also at artisanal level in small villages with simple kilns, always creating value for communities while removing carbon. That is very important. And IBI is a non-profit globally, positioned after 20 years of living, of being around. And our work is to advance sustainable biochar systems. In simple terms, biochar is a carbon-rich material made by heating organic residues, which we'll see more in detail in the next slides. And at IBI, we support producers, researchers, and policymakers around the world, and we help them shape standards, provide training through initiatives like the Biochar Academy, which is one of our flagship projects, and advocate for policies that integrate biochar into climate and agricultural strategies. Coffee is one of the most impactful global value chains that touches lives of millions and generating millions of byproducts each year. And that is why this panel matters for IBI's strategic plan. Coffee is the perfect place to show how biochar links productivity, climate goals, and circular economy principles. As Catherine mentioned, it generates over 40 million tons of available biomass around the world. And that's a big, big resource that can be used and monetized, and that can improve the livelihoods of many communities in different countries, in more than 15 countries. It is visible to consumer and companies, so it doesn't stay on the ground. It goes all the way from top to bottom and bottom to top. And for us, coffee is a perfect case to show how biochar advances productivity, resilience, and climate goals. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity of being today.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward, Louisa, to interrogating your expertise as we dig into this a bit further. But Olivier, why don't you give us a bit of an overview next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. So I'm Olivier Renaud. I'm one of the co-founders of Net Zero. I'm actually the third generation of my family working with biochar, so it's a topic I know quite well. Basically, Net Zero is a biochar producer, but a little bit more than that because we manage end-to-end the supply chain of projects. You can see on this picture one of the first project we built in Brazil, actually. And we've built an expertise on coffee since we first launched the company in 2021, leveraging the dehusking residues from coffee to turn them into biochar and to have a fully circular approach with the farmers. So the same farmers that provide the feedstock to produce the biochar are the ones using the resulting biochar. So we've built already 4 sites in Brazil focusing on coffee, and we're seeing very, very strong impact from a social point of view, an agronomic point of view, and of course a climate point of view. And so we think that this model can be replicated across, all the geographies where coffee is a significant crop. Of course, Brazil is the largest one in the world, but this could work in many other geographies, and with this climate impact and social impact. And maybe just to finish the intro, Net Zero is one of the winners of the X Prize carbon removal competition. So a competition that was whose goal was to assess the scalability of carbon removal solutions. So Tom, you mentioned that biochar is currently 84% of carbon removal deliveries. So that's an illustration of how scalable biochar is, and that was assessed in this competition as well.
Fantastic. We're going to keep with on the Brazil theme here, geography. So, and Tiago, if you're happy, just to introduce yourself. Tiago's going to speak in Portuguese, and then I'll summarize afterwards.
Maybe I'll just translate for Tiago to make sure he understood. Tiago, você pode introduzir você?
Agradecer a oportunidade dada junto à ICO e obrigado pelo convite da Net Zero. Sou Thiago Batista, eu sou fundador da Diamante Origens e nós temos uma grande participação como produtor de café nas matas de Minas Gerais. E nós tivemos a rica oportunidade de estar conhecendo o Biochar da Net Zero. Foi quando nós tivemos a oportunidade de estar fazendo a aquisição de uma propriedade, e quando nós deparamos diante dessa propriedade, nós vimos uma diferença rica em uma área e outra não. Foi ali que foi o nosso contato com a Net Zero e o Biochar dela. O que acontece? Nós hoje, como o Tom Miles é muito bem representado e muito bem posicionado, o nosso solo ele vem degradando ao longo do tempo, porque o solo você vai retirando dele todos os micronutrientes, mesmo você acrescentando através dos fertilizantes, essa disponibilidade no solo ela vai diminuindo. E nós notamos a capacidade que o Biochar tem de fixar esses nutrientes na planta e a capacidade que ele tem de absorver a umidade frente à planta. E observa-se que a área aplicada com o Biochar ela fica uma árvore muito mais estruturada do que uma árvore sem Biochar. Então, nós levamos em consideração que nós estamos trabalhando frente a uma cafeicultura que, antes mais do que nunca, necessita de pensar no futuro, de pensar na sustentabilidade da cultura. O Biochar, da Net Zero, ele vem de encontro com essa demanda recorrente a nível Brasil e eu creio que a nível do mundo. Então, o que ele fornece hoje para o solo, a fixação dos nutrientes, fixação de umidade, o que ele fornece em termos de estruturação, capacitando a planta de absorver mais os nutrientes, nós observamos um ganho agronômico significativo para a nossa cafeicultura. Então, nós tivemos um ganho agronômico grande. Ao decorrer do período, há uma diminuição da necessidade de aplicação de fertilizantes químicos e nós estamos hoje, mais do que nunca, trabalhando em cima de uma agricultura regenerativa, tá? E então o Biochar ele nos permite avançar para essa agricultura regenerativa. Nós tivemos essa oportunidade, nós estamos trabalhando, nós estamos com a fazenda hoje aplicando 100% da área, tá? Nós começamos com uma área menor e logo em seguida nós fizemos aquisição, devolvendo a biomassa para a Net Zero e voltando com o biochar já processado para nossas lavouras. Então, nós
Tiago,
estamos vindo.
talvez você pode dar mais detalhes depois, isso é só uma introdução, tá?
Ok. Me desculpa, eu entendi que já
Tá bom.
poderia dar toda a explicação, né? Então, nós tivemos aí o contato com o biochar da Net Zero, segundo dessa forma, e através dessa aquisição dessa propriedade, e hoje nós estamos 100% aplicando o biochar nas nossas fazendas, levando em consideração o ganho agronômico e levando em consideração a nossa agricultura regenerativa. Foi assim que foi o nosso contato aí com a Net Zero.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a really useful introduction. I think it's going to be really fascinating to pull out those points you raised around moisture, around micronutrients, and around shifting from a pilot to then spreading out across your whole estate as well. So thank you for providing those perspectives, and we'll come back to that because I think that's going to be a really interesting point. We're now going to shift from Brazil northwards to Colombia. And Thomas, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and Coterra.
Sure, happy to. So, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thomas, I'm one of the co-founders of Cotierra, and I'm super excited to talk about biochar and coffee. And I think two of my favorite topics. And I think we see from the previous panelists already how excited we are all about the potential that biochar and coffee has together. So yeah, at Cotierra, what we are doing is actually we make farmers part of the solution. So we enable them to take their own soil health into their own hands. So our solution is a solution that enables farmers to produce biochar themselves in order to restore their soil, build better and more productive farmland, more climate resilience, and at the same time reduce the carbon footprint. What makes our technology unique is that it's a combination of a mobile technology that is clean, eliminating residual methane emissions, and finally, it's very easy to operate, so there's no pre-processing required. And also during the process, it's very easy to operate for farmers themselves. So how it all works is that we work together with big coffee commodity traders. We have partnerships with some of the largest in the world. And together we actually go and enable farmers to produce biochar themselves. So we build up large farm networks and implement our mobile solution in these networks. And then our mobile equipment that can actually produce directly where the residues are coming from in the field are being operated by the farmers themselves. And I think important to notice, we are using the pruning wood from the coffee tree renovation to produce biochar. And afterwards, farmers would use the biochar in co-composting of their pulp. And that's also one of the huge benefits we've seen when biochar is applied on the pulp. And I think probably I'll have more time afterwards to talk about it, but it just becomes much easier to compost. And the final product is an amazing soil improver. So I think that's enough from my side for now. I'm looking forward to dig in deeper into how everything works and what the benefits are. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Thomas. And I think it's clear that we have this more industrialized, centralized projects in net zero, and then we have this more distributed, these different feedstocks, and we're going to be fascinating to dig out some of those business model, some of the reasons why as we get into this discussion. Next, I want to call on Pedro. So we've talked to Tiago, who is working at the level of the farm, Thomas and Olivier, who are developing projects within the value chain. And then, Pedro, it'd be good to talk about where you sit within the value chain as you have a different position, and tell us a bit about your work with biochar as well in Colombia.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of the conversation. First of all, I don't want to assume everybody understands or knows Caravela. I work for Caravela Coffee, which is a specialty green coffee exporter, importer. We are We are the only link between the farm, the gate of the farm, and the gate of the roastery, and we connect those smallholder farmers in 7 origins in Latin America with roasters around the world. Our approach to the farm level is through our PECA team, which is our technical assistance or education program to coffee producers, and our position in the biochar framework is that we are navigating how it's being developed. Me personally, from my academic part, I know biochar, but from leading the technical assistance team, we are in the process of understanding what biochar is, what biochar isn't, and what we present here is kind of one of those lines of learning that we have done in our farm in Cauca, in Colombia, which is Belgravia, and we have kind of approaching to the production, the different reactors that could be used, different types of organic matter, the temperature of the reactor, and try to learn a little bit more about the pyrolysis going on in those reactors and the organic matter that could go in and how it goes out the process. In the next slide is how we follow kind of that understanding. First of all, as Thomas was saying, activating the biochar with the compost and the organic residues of the farm, trying to make that circular with all the solid residues of the farm, and then how to implement it. In Belgravia, we have a farm with 20 plus different varieties of coffee, and we are trying to learn different ways of implementing the biochar, to just spread it on the ground, to build some trenches and vary the composition or the dose of biochar. So our main kind of status is learning about biochar, trying to navigate these decentralized, centralized opportunities for the biochar, and learn which would be the best way for us to promote these in our supply chain partners at the farm level.
Right, brilliant. Well, that's our fantastic panelist group. Few different contexts, few different locations. And so I'd like to turn now to Louisa. Louisa, would you be able to just give us a brief overview of what is biochar, how you make it? I think we've had a good overview so far, but it may be worth just giving some of those key stats around what it is, and then we can talk a bit about some of those soil benefits as well, and then we'll come on to talk to the farmer side.
Okay, thank you very much again, Tom. And yes, as we have seen in this context, I'm going to refer the organic matter or the residues available to produce biochar in the coffee context. So I'm going to talk about the availability of the prunings, the husks, the pulp, the parchment. And as Pedro said, each of the available feedstock or biomass needs to be treated differently in order to produce biochar. So biochar is made through the process of pyrolysis, which is an oven or a kiln, or depending on the technology, is high temperatures, low access or minimum oxygen, in order to carbonize the biomass, not to burn it, in order to preserve. When we put the biomass through the pyrolysis process, what we get is this rich material, this carbonized material, which is highly absorbent, that is valuable for soil, and as a climate resilient material also in the built environment. It is a way to remediate highly polluted soils, because for me, biochar is an amazing thing, because it has the potential, after it become from biomass, which is this organic life thing, to become a mineral that has the possibility of identifying. It can be a shield to stop the contaminants, but it also can be like this house for the good things, which are the nutrients, water holding, and also for the microbial life that it goes there. How it does it, I don't know, because I'm not a chemist, but it is amazing to me that it could be a shield, but it can also be a house, and it helps to regenerate the soils that have been degraded. It can provide a change in the structure of the soil so it can retain the water, and it helps in times of drought. Eventually and gradually, the soil, the life beneath what we see, it's getting better. It's getting the nutrients are not leaching out, are getting there. So in economic terms, it turns out that the farmers in this case, they will have, well, in every case, when we're talking about agriculture, their inputs in terms of water usage and for chemical fertilizers will reduce gradually. It is not a magic trick. It is science, as I said at the beginning, it is based in science. So we have to analyze a lot of different parameters when using and producing biochar, but it is a proven tool. And also, as I said, it locks carbon dioxide. But it removes it from the atmosphere and it locks it in the soil. It can be locked from 100 years, 1,000 years. It will depend on the way it was produced, the biochar, and also from the biomass. But it is an amazing product, as we said, with this impact environmentally and also in the livelihoods and economic benefits for the community. And we see biochar in the value chain. Again, it has from the farm, we have the prunings, from the mills and cooperative, we have the husks and pulps and the parchment, which is like this thing, I don't know, like the cover of the bin. I didn't know that, but now I've been learning about the biochar in the coffee industry. And this helps farmers to improve soils, water retention, and yields, because if you have a healthier soil and you have it has been regenerated, it is more resilient, so your yields are going to be better. It reduces waste, no more pollution through burning or decomposition, no more methane emissions or the reduction of those. And we can valorize or revalorize something that is left as a residue, but it has a value that currently it doesn't have a market, it doesn't, but it can be used and it can be transformed. For the roasters and the traders, it has a sustainability story, and they can generate carbon credits that those benefits can be shared with the producers, with farmers as well. There are very interesting models right now on how the coffee farmers are partnering with these project developers to transform the residues into biochar, to apply them into the soil, to make the value chain more resilient, but also to generate an additional revenue stream through the carbon credits. And for the consumers, it's climate smart coffee. We're still in the process of building this, this awareness about that. If you are able to buy a premium coffee, go and do it, because the story behind that premium coffee that has been with biochar, whatever, it has an impact in the climate and in the livelihoods of many people around the world. So for me, biochar helps to close the loop in a circular economy model. And as I said, in this context, especially for coffee, it helps to improve soil health, allows carbon sequestration, and it truly has an impact on sustainability. And the opportunities and risks, there are many. And there's always like, for me, I like to see the risk and then the opportunities, like because they're kind of synonyms, right? Because we have the soil improvement, the climate benefits that I said, the economic benefits, and the carbon removal and storage. And what are the challenges? That if we produce a poor quality biochar, and if we're aiming to generate carbon credits, probably that won't be a good fit, because we need a good amount of carbon organic content. Another risk of producing poor quality biochar is that we are not meeting what is a biochar. And in order to make sure that we are producing biochar, we have to follow the standards that, those standards that have been internationally approved in terms of the characterization of biochar. So we know that we have the H2C ratio, that we are not carrying the pollutants, the PAHs, or the heavy metals, that we are keeping it in the threshold that had been approved in terms of keeping it safe, and that it will make a benefit to the soil and to the environment rather than cause a harm. The high upfront costs, that is something that is probably delaying the industry. And what we're trying to do is by having panels or spaces like this one, to let other people know, and those who have the money or those who have the willingness or have the, these businesses, that this is an investment, this is an opportunity, and that if they set aside some money or a strategy, probably they will benefit, not immediately, but probably in 2 or 3 years, they will see all the benefits in terms of reputational, credibility for their enterprises, their relationship with the community, with the farmers. And, that money that they put up front is going to pay off pretty well. And there's also training needs, because we have to explain everyone what is biochar, what are the impacts, how to make biochar safely, because we're dealing with residues and we're dealing with, in conditions of fire and emissions and everything that need to be controlled, that have to be kept under certain parameters in order to be safe. And there's also the misapplication risk, that we really need to see what are the current conditions of the soil health, and what are the needs if we have an alkaline soil or if we have an acidic soil, and which would be the best fit for that soil in order to improve it, not to hurt it, and also to see what would be the right dosage of biochar to put it and how to apply it. If we mix it first, what are the mixers available there in order to charge the biochar, and not to apply it raw in order to compete with the plant for the nutrients. So there are many things to train people before using biochar, but it's an investment to do. The intention is to make it safe for everybody and to make it just, to have this environmental justice and the ability and the opportunity for everyone to access to it.
Thanks, Louisa. Okay, really helpful. I think that context around, like every agricultural input, we need to be very aware of the risks. And I think that's probably hopefully something we're going to touch on later. So we've heard a bit around the theory, but I think now we're going to go right to the soil. And I think the first question that I want to ask Diego and you, Pedro, through your work directly with the farmers and also operating your own areas, and Olivia, if you're happy to translate as well, that'd be most helpful. I think the question I want to ask is around why biochar, why now? You have biomass that could have been composted, that could have been used for other things. Why did you decide to come and take it and convert it into biochar at this time?
Ok. Tiago, a pergunta é para você. Basicamente é por que Biochar e como que você conheceu o Biochar e por que você entrou nesta parceria de produção de Biochar e uso de Biochar?
A biomassa gerada pelo café, ela é basicamente utilizada na região para queima, para geração de calor, para a seca do café. E ao queimar essa biomassa, nós liberamos aí uma grande poluição aí para a nossa atmosfera, principalmente o alcatrão. Então, o Biochar da Net Zero, o processo que é realizado, ele traz para nós uma grande vantagem climática, e ele traz um grande ganho agronômico para nós, porque uma vez ele feito a pirólise completa nele, que é feita, e ele volta ao solo, ele gera uma grande capacidade de fixação dos nutrientes na planta, uma grande capacidade de fixação de umidade no solo. E foi por isso que nós optamos aí para o uso do Biochar, evitando emissão de CO2, emissão de alcatrão e favorecendo um ganho agronômico nutricional para a nossa planta. Por isso nós utilizamos o Biochar Net Zero.
Right. And Tiago, just to summarize, previously that biomass would have been used to or being burnt and then to dry the coffee, and now that's being used instead for a good purpose. What are you using instead of? Are you able to take the pyrolysis heat to then dry the coffee today? What are you substituting?
I might answer this one if you don't mind. We don't use the pyrolysis heat because it's a decentralized model. All the farms generate the residues in the farms themselves, and then we centralize only the residues in the factory. But the drying of the coffee happens in the farm. But there's a local legislation now of preventing the burning of coffee husk because of the health risks mainly in the region.
Wonderful. So you're solving a number of problems here, which is great to hear. Tiago, you talked a bit around earlier in the conversation around reducing your fertilizer requirement. For you, is a key driver, is it yield? Is it fertilizer reduction? Is it quality of your crop? Or is it resilience to drought and flooding? Or is it something else? Because I think you being right at the heart of this, it's fascinating to hear what are you finding is the most sort of important attribute of the application.
Tiago, você falou de vários benefícios do biochar. A pergunta é: qual é o benefício mais importante para você? É a redução de fertilizantes, aumento do rendimento, a resiliência climática ou talvez algo mais, a qualidade do café?
Então, eu não teria um único benefício só como produtor do uso do biochar. Na verdade, ele é um conjunto de soluções extremamente viável para a nossa cafeicultura. Nós trabalhamos em cima de uma agricultura, de uma cafeicultura hoje regenerativa. Então, com o uso do biochar, nós diminuímos a poluição. Com o uso do biochar, nós diminuímos o uso de fertilizantes no solo, gerando para nós um ganho agronômico. E nós observamos na planta, isso a gente tange isso todos os dias nas nossas lavouras, o ganho nutricional da planta. Então, não é um único benefício só, são vários benefícios que nos levam à utilização. Nós poluímos menos, nós usamos menos produtos químicos, que é o fertilizante químico, e nós temos, com isso, a redução da poluição e um ganho agronômico por causa dessa redução utilizando o biochar. Nós temos um incremento de produção nas nossas lavouras.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tiago. So this is a complex problem, and Biochar is able to solve a number of these areas that you're seeing and the challenges that you're facing as well. Pedro, I'll just pass a similar question over to you. We've talked about water, we've talked about yield, we've talked about fertilizer, we've talked about nutrition. Within your farm group, how are you seeing these benefits being distributed? And if you have any numbers to put to any of these attributes, that would be fascinating as well.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I think the why to engage with biochar is because of all of the above claims and benefits that are promoted with this quote unquote new technology for the coffee industry. It would be to be very stubborn not to engage with biochar with all the claims and benefits are behind. But as I said, from my understanding of biochar and personal understanding, it has to be done with very cautiously, and the why from all those claims, I would think, is in our PECA team we have been seeing year after year more problems with the soil, especially the structure. I wouldn't say floods. Most of it's in steep slopes that coffee is grown, at least in the origins where we work. I know Tiago's origin might be different, but it's more about landslides. It's more about soil losing the structure and trying to understand how there are different mechanisms that could help producers to increase farm resilience, while being a mechanism that looks for fair compensation of the risks they are assuming when implementing these kind of new technologies. And that's what we are looking for. Is there an opportunity to increase soil resilience while decreasing cost of production and increasing the income of the farm in a fair mechanism? Because it's important to understand that the stakeholder that is assuming most of the risk with biochar are the producers. And we need to balance this short-term carbon credit profit that we're looking for and the long-term effects that a technology that is not completely understood could have on the soils of farmers. And those long-term benefits or risks, we want to understand them first before saying, like, we want to promote biochar beans because of such and such reasons in our producer base.
Super helpful, Pedro. I think that point you made around soil structure, soil chemistry, soil biology, but soil structure being a really interesting point here. And then obviously the climate resilience angle as well. We've got this great opportunity in this webinar to really sort of compare two different models of biochar projects. We have one centralized industrial model from Olivier's work, Net Zero, and then we have this more distributed solution. And I'm really interested just to spend some time comparing these two and why these models came about. I think, Thomas, I wouldn't mind starting with you and just thinking about why did you come up with this distributed solution? We have differences in feedstock as well between these two that it's worth pointing out. I wondered if you could just give an overview of why you moved to the solution you have in the place you have, and also how the labor and compensation and business model may differ between these two modes.
Yeah, super happy to start here. So for us, it was two limitations that we saw in biochar in the current form, mostly produced centralized. So the two limitations were around biomass access, logistics behind centralizing it and then distributing it again, and availability and competition. So that's number one. I'm gonna double click on that afterwards. And number two is the farmer adoption side.
Cool,
Part
Thomas,
of this.
Yeah, we just lost you for a second there. You're back.
Okay, perfect. So we believe that farmers should be part of the solution. They should be integrated in the model, and that's what we are. To double click on the first one on the biomass side. It says my internet connection is unstable. You still hear me fine?
Yeah, you're coming in and out. If it gets any worse, I think we'll switch over to Olivier and then come back.
Okay, perfect. You just let me know.
Cool. But yeah, we're good at the moment.
Okay, yeah. So on the biomass side, what we are seeing in many distributed value chains such as coffee, cacao, is that most of the biomass occurs directly in the field and is then very often completely underutilized. And so with our mobile solution, we have access to this unlimited residue streams directly at the farm. And then the other side was to really involve the farmers and give them the power and enable them to restore the soils themselves. So how our model works is that we provide the equipment to farmers and they are producing the biochar themselves and receive the biochar back for free, in comparison with other models where they would have to buy the biochar back from the centralized facility. And that's feasible in some regions and with some kind of economic power of farmers, and in other regions that might not be possible.
So the farmer is committing labor, the farmer commits the labor, and the compensation is the biochar that they're getting to put on their soil, and the equipment.
Exactly. And maybe one last comment to also go into what Pedro said before. So one of the things we we've seen with decentralized was that there's still issues around making it as easy as possible for farmers, while at the same time being able to produce in a clean manner and high quality biochar. So that's what we are optimizing for with our technology, to have a solution that is easy to use for the farmer, so reduced labor effort, and at the same time that we can ensure that it's clean with no residual emissions, and at the same time producing a high quality biochar for which we can guarantee the quality through our integrated system control in the reactor.
And Thomas, just to dig into when we talk about clean, there's been big concerns around methane slip, around open air burning. The optics aren't great for open air barbecues. That's it puts people off. And this is a slightly different solution, or a more advanced solution. So maybe you can just talk a bit about the iteration that you've got to solve some of these challenges.
Exactly, Tom. I think that's one of the major concerns in distributed models. One is clean production. I think the other one is also traceability, being able to trace what's happening across thousands of production sites. So to double click on the first one, on ensuring the clean production, our system is a closed system. We have an external technology certification that certifies our technology with extremely low residual methane emissions, and that's the major concern that big corporates would have to implement it. Would be like, okay, we have open flames, we have residual methane emissions. Can we implement that in our supply chain, or is there a risk behind it? And I mean, not saying that is not also a very good step to do towards more resilient value chains, but I think there are some concerns, and we are addressing them with our clean solution. And yeah, as said, externally certified, absolutely minimal residual methane emissions that we're trying to completely eliminate, but we're already extremely low, near zero
Right.
grams of methane.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing it when it's sort of in the field as well, because I know that you can't show many images at the moment. Olivier, so we talked a bit about that, the distributed solution, bringing that pyrolysis machine to the farmer, them having the labor. You've got a slightly different model, and I'd love to know, just dig into the model that you landed on within the Brazilian coffee value chain, and why and how you were able to do it.
Yeah. So indeed, it's a quite different model. I think it all starts with the mission of Net Zero. So our mission is to bring biochar at scale. And so we've given a lot of thought about how to do that in the most efficient way to really try to have significant impact quickly. And our conclusion, at least on the geographies we've been working on until now, is that a centralized model with an industrial approach is the most effective to quickly bring biochar at scale. And so this is the kind of starting point. Then there's associated considerations that we hear quite often when it comes to biochar production. There's something around quality of biochar, which is absolutely essential for us. And an industrial process is the best way, we think, to guarantee a very homogeneous quality of the product, not only for the agronomic use, but also for the climate benefits and for the carbon sequestration in particular. And I think this is quite important to the big players in the coffee supply chains. We might talk about this a little bit later in the discussion, but quality is really essential. And everything also around how it's produced. We talked about methane. There's other considerations. We could talk about carbon monoxide. We could be talking about health and safety in general in the production of biochar. And so I think this is really kind of the way we found most effective to address all these issues at once. And of course, to have economies of scale at some point, because this is what will really drive the scale up of biochar. If you don't have a very efficient model that works for everyone, that makes the biochar cheap for the farmers, and that makes the production of biochar also sufficiently cheap to have an interesting investment, because we're talking about an industrial process. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to bring biochar at scale. And so that's why we've had this approach. And so it's an approach around standardization, be it of the process or the upstream and downstream, and that's the approach we're following.
And Olivia, could you just talk a bit around how you receive? So you receive the biomass, and do you have to pay for the biomass, or do you receive that for
No.
free? And then what happens at the other end as well?
Yeah. So our policy is to never pay for the biomass, so as to ensure that it's really additional. Because if you start paying for something, usually you're diverting other uses, or you're competing with other uses. So the relationship we have with the farmers is we go to them and we say, whatever excess biomass you have that you're willing to give us, you can give it to us. And then we go and collect it in the farms. So in Brazil, it's organized like each farm does its own dehusking. In some other geographies, we work in Cameroon as well. You have some more centralized dehusking facilities. So this can vary a little bit, but in all cases, we handle the logistics of going to these dehusking facilities, collecting the biomass, bringing it to the facility, building a storage of this biomass, because we operate 24/7 all year long, but you have kind of seasonality of coffee harvesting and dehusking. And so in order to run 24/7, we need large storage areas. And then the biochar is returned to the farmer at a relatively low price, and a price that is very acceptable for the farmer, so that you have a very good payback of using the product in your fields.
So I find this an interesting distinction between the farmers who commit labor and they get compensated through product, or the farmer doesn't commit labor in the industrial model, and they purchase that. They don't need any compensation for that. Would that be a fair sort of way to describe it?
Yes, I think it's I mean, it's a little bit simplified, but that's the idea. I think the idea is also that the price of biochar is low because you have carbon finance. And so in a way, carbon credits are subsidizing the price of biochar or the cost of biochar for the farmers, so that it becomes affordable for them. And so that's why it's important, especially at the beginning, to have very committed buyers, and that prices are relatively high. They're high because it requires significant investment, and because if you want to have a certain quality standard, you need these prices. But it's also something around the social impact and the low cost of the biochar for the farmers, especially before you have real economies of scale. And so once the industry grows, you'll probably have economies of scale, and that can be absorbed in the model. But for now, it's important to have this, support from the carbon credit buyers as well.
I think one of the stakeholders we haven't really touched on so far, and I'd like to bring Pedro into this bit of the conversation as well, is around the coffee companies, the CPGs or the brands. They're both Quintera, yourselves, Caravela, all have strategic relationships with coffee companies, and I'm just interested to know what do they get out of it? What are they seeing? What's their strategic interest in biochar in the value chain? Maybe Pedro, I wondered if I could come to you first, as an exporter, and then is there a premium? How do you see that relationship between biochar, yourselves, and the eventual sellers of the product? And then I'll come back to Thomas and Olivier, because I'm really interested to get your views as well.
Tom, we as an exporter, more than an importer, we are kind of focused in what would be the long-term impacts of applying or engaging with biochar for farms. And as I said, we are navigating these different scenarios and different business models. As you heard, they represent different kind of opportunities and challenges for producers. They could be applied in different communities, and we are navigating, and it's a quite extreme opposite businesses, like you have the zero investment model to the $100,000 model investment, and we're trying to navigate what is more fair for the producer. As Carabela, yes, there is a story behind insetting carbon and all, and but we want to kind of isolate ourselves from the carbon market, for the carbon credit, from the rush of transferring these into US dollars, and focus on the impact to producers at the end. Our only responsibility as exporter and having a technical assistance team is to have a very robust due diligence process in understanding what biochar is, what it isn't, and what would be the possible benefits, but also effects for producers. So at the moment, we have done some things. We have an early kind of a approach to net zero, to Oliver's team, but also last year we did some pilot projecting with Thomas as well in Huila, our own kind of evaluation in Belgravia, and we're starting a new partnership with a local university and a team of investigation in the academy that allow us. Yes, there are very different kind of studies done, but we want to adapt those studies to our supply chain. What would be the effects of biochar in the different types of soils that we work with, the different varieties that are used in the specialty coffee, and the different doses that could be used. So that's our take at the moment on it.
Okay, perfect. That's useful context. And then Thomas, you've got some strategic relationships with Vol Cafe and I think maybe Neumann. It'd be good, what do you see as those? Why are those houses getting involved? Why is there interest at that level? Where's the demand coming from?
Main driver, ensuring future supply. When we talk to the big CPGs and also to the big traders, it's really, I mean, decarbonization and carbon, as Pedro said, it's there, but it's not the main driver. The main driver is to ensure the health and the stability of the supply chain, because they're seeing what's happening. I think also in cacao, and they're seeing what's happening in coffee as well, and they're looking like, okay, cacao could be like a little bit our future, where like really like whole areas and whole regions become like heavily degraded and not productive anymore. And so it's really about investing in the origin and helping farmers to improve their productivity, which is the main driver for them to wanting to implement biochar. What we're seeing.
Super interesting. Olivier, I know, really interested to get your views as well.
Yeah, I think that there's there's a lot of things on which the end brands and also the traders are interested. I would say there's three main ones. The first one is for sure resilience, and I think a number of you may have seen these studies that try to project how coffee production could evolve in the future because of climate change. It doesn't look good. And so there's something definitely around, how do I maintain, and not even increase, maintain production of coffee. And that's, the benefits around water retention in particular, and also soil quality, to have this climate resilience of the actual trees that produce the coffee. So I think this is, a very strong driver. There's another driver which is also kind of embedded in coffee by nature, and coffee is a high margin crop. And so when you have a high margin crop, you have quality expectations, and you usually also have kind of social responsibility expectations. And so if you can kind of continuously work to provide more, livelihood for the farmers, kind of shared value in the supply chain, so that kind of the farmers are also compensated for their work. This is a narrative that is especially present in coffee and also in other crops like cocoa, which are higher margin crops. And the last but not least, and probably the most important aspect midterm for all these players is the decarbonization of their supply chain. And I think here, they're facing an almost impossible challenge, because on the one hand, you want to kind of produce the same, ideally more, but at least the same. And at the same time, you look at the numbers and you see that fertilizers represent the single largest contributor to the carbon footprint of coffee. And so you have, two options. Either you remove the fertilizers, or you drastically decrease them, but then you will drop the yields significantly. Order of magnitude, you divide by 2 your yields, or you find an alternative. And until recently, there was not really any alternative. And so there was this impossible equation of productivity and sustainability. And I think this is really where biochar comes in, because you have a solution that can help reduce the use of fertilizers. You better retain the nutrients, so you can put less fertilizers for the same effect or even better effects. And so you can decarbonize at the source through the reduction of use. And you can actually inset also the carbon that is inside the biochar itself, and that can help neutralize any remaining emissions from your supply chain. And so you have some leading brands like Nespresso, and I could cite others that have short-term net zero commitments. So Nespresso on their quality program, it's 2030. 2030 is tomorrow. It's less than 5 years. So how do you do net zero coffee without completely changing the value that is created for the producers, the brands, and the consumers? Well, there's not many solutions beyond biochar, and that's why when you look at the strategic roadmaps of Nespresso, but also I could cite players that we don't work with yet that have also biochar in their roadmap, like I don't know, JDE Peets, for example. They count a lot on biochar because it's kind of addresses with a single product all these challenges at the same time.
It's if anyone in the audience wants to see the strategic importance of biochar, have a look at JDE Peet's last strategic pan as the biochar slice really goes up to an incredible amount over to 2030, 2040. I think before we move on to the sort of final two questions, Olivia, have you seen this translate into any product premiums in terms of coffee, or is that not quite there yet?
We're
do you expect it?
We're starting to see the premises of that. We've had actually a first. We've been pushing quite hard to have the traders and the brand to start getting involved in that, to recognize the difference of because this is more work for the farmers essentially to produce with biochar, especially at the beginning. And so we're seeing the premises of this kind of interest of paying a price premium. We've had a first sale of coffee with the cooperative we work with. We started doing the first project with in Brazil. They sold some coffee with a price premium to a Japanese trader, Marubeni. And so we're kind of at the very beginning of that. I think there's going to need to be way more standardization again for this to become widespread. But this shows the interest of the market, and I think this will be the right way to incentivize producers to adopt biochar as well.
It's great to see that just starting. And I know in our piece of work we did, I think we talked about a 15% premium that's just sort of starting to appear in the marketplace. We're just about at time for the discussion. And what I want to do is go around each of the panelists in turn. And if you could just say, on the one hand, what are you most excited about for the future? And two, what are you most uncertain about when it comes to biochar and integrating biochar into the coffee value chain? I don't know if someone wants to go first. Maybe Louisa, if you're happy to go first. I know I'm not giving you a lot of time to think there.
Yeah. Thank you again, Tom. Well, a lot of opportunities, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of risks involved. For me personally, I do believe that biochar takes a village, needs a village. It's not a one-man show, a one-person show. We need academia, we need policy makers, we need the willingness of the farmers that generate those resources that will produce the biochar. And we also need, the high end. We need to inform. What do we need to do? We need to work together. And that's where institutions like the International Coffee Organization, the Center for Circular Economy, and the International Trade Center, along with the project developers, with the contacts of, those who produce the in this case, the green beans and the resources, but also the connections with those who will be willing to pay for that additional work that the farmers are going to go through in order to produce biochar. Because coffee is a complex value chain. Biochar is a complex value chain. So put them together, what would be the incentive for the farmer to go through additional, work of registering or doing the documentation to provide the traceability of the origin of the residual biomass in order to have that all the things that go together, but also all the way to the buyer who will be willing to pay for that. So I think that's our job, to come together, to work, to design those field trials that are so needed, as Pedro said, that we need long-term results, because agriculture is not about 1 or 2 cycles. We need to prove that. So we need the willingness of those who probably said, okay, I'll do a trial for a couple of years and then show the results. And seeing is believing. Probably once seeing the results might be interested in doing it, and probably that would be the multiplying effect that we need in order to spread it in all geographies.
Luisa, that's a great point to then turn over to the Q&A on. I think there's a really interesting question here from Sophie Tolman, which builds on your point. And Tiago, I'd like to direct this towards yourself. And Sophie asks, how long does it take for farmers to see an effect of biochar on their yield, on their productivity? What's the time span from application to seeing the effects? And Tiago, I'd be very interested to get your opinion. Olivia, are you happy? Are you okay to translate?
Bom, Tiago, a pergunta para você é quanto tempo demora para ver os resultados do biochar uma vez aplicado?
Tiago, I'm sorry, you're on mute at the moment.
Após a aplicação do biochar, você já vê o impacto visual na planta no primeiro ano de aplicação. E você vai ver um ganho agronômico em torno do segundo para o terceiro ano. É o período de adaptação da planta, e ela vai absorvendo ali a reestruturação do solo promovida pelo biochar. Então você vê visualmente o impacto no primeiro ano, na estrutura fisiológica da planta, e você já começa a obter esses ganhos a partir do segundo, terceiro ano, com a redução do uso de fertilizantes químicos.
Thanks, Tiago. So you saw in the first year, you saw an agronomic gain, and then you saw this increase into the second and third year. Olivia, that's right, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And Luisa, just to build on that, because I know there's been some interesting work done on charging or not charging biochar. I think it's just for our audience, just highlighting some of that, just a risk in some contexts around first year yield as well.
Well, there's no plain a general recipe, but it is a best practice to charge the biochar, not to apply it raw, as we say, that from the oven to the soil. And what is the idea behind it? To pre-populate the biochar, to have it with some nutrients in it, or probably some microorganisms. It will depend on what you have available. There are some engineered microorganisms to charge biochar to make it a little bit more stronger in order before applying it. But if you don't have those resources and you have compost, you can charge it with your compost, so it goes like in a better shape. And also by doing that, broadly at the gate of your factory, it also it becomes the end use of, you know, the end use of biochar, in terms that the reversal risk for carbon credit generation ends there. So it has a lot of advantages in terms, but also, as they say, I'm not an agronomist either, but they say that by doing that, biochar does not compete with the nutrients for the with the plant, for at least for the first year. So it has a lot of advantages by doing so.
Great. And I think so, very context specific, specific to the biochar, specific to the agronomy of the soil, specific to the climate. There's another question here, just following on from that, from Santiago de los Rios, who says, based on Olivier and Tiago's experience, and Thomas, I'll open this up to you as well, what would you say is the reduction, the magnitude of fertilizer reduction that you've seen? I know that Husk Ventures has done some really interesting work on this in Cambodia, but how have you seen this? Because it's something that people want to know about.
I mean, for whom is the question?
So it's Tiago.
Tá, então, Thiago, a pergunta para você é qual é a proporção que você consegue reduzir de fertilizantes?
Essa proporção, ela é uma proporção progressiva, tá? De acordo que a planta vai reestruturando o solo, você vai diminuindo, nós vamos chegar a uma economia entre 20% a 30% de redução de uso de fertilizantes químicos.
Okay, interesting. So that's 20 to 30% in the use of chemical fertilizers. I think that's quite consistent with what we've seen in a number of other trials around the world. And I think if anyone's interested to dig into this further, the report Unlocking the Future of Climate Smart Agriculture really goes into a bit of detail about this as well. There's also a few questions, and we're coming sort of towards the end, but there's a few questions here just asking more about the carbon crediting aspect of these projects. And I think it may be worth us just explaining a bit around the standards, the LCA activities. And Thomas, I wouldn't mind coming to you on this, just explaining how you quantify how much carbon has been removed from the atmosphere, and then how you go about selling those credits as well.
We're happy to dig into that part. So the first part on how it's being quantified, well, we need to have traceability of how much biochar is being produced. Then we need to be able to measure how much carbon is inside of that biochar. So in order to do that, we sent that to labs actually in Germany. We hope to build up labs locally as well that can do that. But we send it to labs in Germany that assure the carbon percentage inside of the biochar and also the stability of that carbon. And then at the same time, of course, we have an LCA behind where we are deducting any kind of emissions that might have happened during the process, be it, for example, in our case, to transport our reactors from farm to farm. So the emissions that are associated with that are being subtracted from the final amount of CO2 capture that we can account for. And last part, also super important, we need to track that it goes into the soil and that it's being applied to the soil. And at that point, we can generate carbon removal credits. And from there, we have an external certification, external methodology that actually tells us how to do those steps and many more steps actually that are included there. And we get certified under this standard and then are able to emit carbon credits to the voluntary carbon market that can be bought from any kind of company that wants to compensate their residual emissions that they cannot reduce themselves. So in order to achieve net zero emissions, you probably still will have in the end some emissions in your supply chain, and then you go and compensate that with permanent carbon removals, such as from biochar. And yeah, we currently partner with intermediaries that are taking the responsibility to sell those credits to the market afterwards. And this financing stream is basically what finances our operations, what finances putting the reactors into the field, what finances the training of farmers and the staff that is doing that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Thomas. I would like to just thank everyone who's stayed with us until now. I think that's been a really rich, a really robust conversation. It's been wonderful to be able to contrast this discussion around centralized industrial units, with those who are with these decentralized units solving different problems in different places, with two developers who are right at the top of the game in biochar and really pushing forward the frontier of what biochar can do. It's wonderful to have the viewpoint of the farmer, really that on the ground knowledge. So Tiago, thank you very much for coming today and also being so honest and open about why you're doing this on your land. And also to have the view of Pedro and Caravella on putting this into your coffee value chain from the farmer to the export as well. And Louisa, really appreciated speaking to your expertise in biochar as well. So a really robust, exciting, interesting conversation. And I'll hand over to Catherine to close us out.
Tom, thank you. And thank you again to all of our panelists. Again, your expertise is incredible, and there's been so many questions and interest in biochar in the coffee sector and among our working groups and at the Center for Circular Economy in Coffee, and we learned so much today. I'm eager to learn more. If you're interested in joining the center, please reach out to us, and also participating in the Circular Economy Working Group. We will be sending out the recording and information for all of our panelists to everyone who registered. So thank you again. And we look forward to our next webinar, which will be in October. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, everyone. Thank you, Tom, for this fantastic moderation.
Wonderful. See you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.